There is about a 20-second lag, but we should be live now.
Okay, thank you, Jalissa, and thank you to the entire Brookhaven team for assisting us. Let me say good evening and welcome to the City of Brookhaven Social Justice, Race, and Equity Commission meeting. Today is Thursday, February 18th, 2021. I am John J. Funny, and I will be presiding this evening. So that we may limit the amount of interruption, I ask that you please mute your devices when you're not speaking, and that you turned off or silence your cell phone devices. This Social Justice, Race, and Equity Commission meeting, public meeting, has been called on matters pursuant to the Mayor and City Council's approved resolution 2020-09-01 to establish the Social Justice and Race and Equity Commission, and as specified on tonight's agenda. This meeting is now called to order. As a way of introduction, I will call the roll in alphabetical order and have each commissioner acknowledge their presence. So commissioners, if you can go ahead and take yourself off of mute, we will roll through the roll call. Roll through the roll call, okay. Commissioner Alexander.
Here.
Commissioner Anwar.
Here.
Commissioner Arif.
Present.
Commissioner Barrera. Commissioner Barrera. Commissioner Becerra. Commissioner Becerra. Commissioner Bowden.
Here.
Commissioner Kane. Commissioner Kane. Commissioner Coriello.
Present.
Commissioner Collins.
Present.
Commissioner Cortez. Commissioner Cortez Zimmerman. Commissioner Korn.
Present.
Commissioner Cruz.
Present.
Commissioner Funny, I'm here. Commissioner Hardy.
Present.
Commissioner Henson.
Yeah, that's me. I'm here.
Commissioner Wright Hudson.
I'm here.
Commissioner Knight. Commissioner Knight. Commissioner Minor.
Present.
Commissioner Moses.
Here.
Commissioner Meriworthy Wall.
Present. Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Naglish.
Here.
Commissioner Nelson. Commissioner Nelson. Commissioner Nais.
Here.
Commissioner Owen.
Here.
Commissioner Petzold. Commissioner Petzold. Commissioner Palmer.
I'm here.
Commissioner Pascal.
Present.
Commissioner Russell.
Present.
Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Commissioner Todd.
Present.
Commissioner Torres.
Present.
Commissioner Wells.
Here.
And Commissioner Woodward.
I'm here.
Did I miss anyone? I think I got everyone. Thank you all for responding to the roll call. We have a quorum and we will proceed. We have 3 excused absence this evening. Commissioner Rabbi Josh Hirschen is away on synagogue business, and Commissioner Beth Window and Commissioner Davis Burnett both had death in their families. So let us keep both David and Beth in our thoughts and prayers. And if you get a moment, just send them a nice little note letting them know that we are thinking about them. That's Commissioner Beth Window and Commissioner Davis Burnett. This month is Black History Month. It's a very important month in the history of our country. Black history is an annual celebration of the achievements of African Americans and a time for recognizing our role and major achievements in US history. We've celebrated Black History Month since 1976, the year that the US president officially signed and designated February as Black History Month. So let us recognize and celebrate Black History Month. The agenda has been forwarded to each commissioner via email and is made public on the Social Justice, Race, and Equity Commission website. At this time, I will entertain, let's back up. Let's do the approval of the meeting minutes. We did have a meeting in January. So at this time, I will ask for an approval of the meeting minutes from our January 21st, 2021 meeting.
This is Jim Moses. I move that we approve the January minute meetings.
Do we have a second?
I second.
And state your name, please, for the record.
Commissioner Alexander.
Thank you, Commissioner Alexander. We have a motion and a second for the approval of the January 21, 2021 meeting minutes. Is there any unreadiness? Is there any unreadiness? Is there any unreadiness? Hearing none, all those who approve state aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
And those who do not approve state nay and state your name. Very good. We have a unanimous approval. Next, we will go to our agenda. And as I mentioned earlier, the agenda was emailed to each of you. It's on the screen. Thank you, Mindy. You can also find the agenda on the Social Justice, Race, and Equity Commission website as well. So at this time, I will entertain a motion for the adoption of the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Commissioner Corn, so moved.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Torres.
I didn't get your name. Say that again, please.
Torres.
Okay, thank you for the motion and the second. Is there any unreadiness on the agenda as presented? Any unreadiness? Any unreadiness? Hearing none. All those who approve to adopt the agenda as presented, signify by stating aye.
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 Okay,
Aye.
Aye.
all right. And those who do not approve, state nay and your name. Okay, very good. We have an approved agenda. So thank you all for that. And we will move quickly into the next area of business, the commission charge. This commission, as I mentioned, was put in place by the mayor and council. We thank them for the leadership. We have a charge, and our charge is to review the city's vision and mission statement and make any suggestion as we see the need for revisions. We're also to make recommendations for improvement to Brookhaven policies and protocol that guides hiring and retention, procurement and contracting in those two areas. Additionally, we will be looking at making recommendations and best practices to guide our Brookhaven Police Department policies, action, and accountability regarding continuum of force. Further, we will look at proposals to ensure continued robust citizen participation related to social justice, race, and equity for all citizens that live here and reside in the great city of Brookhaven. And then finally, this commission, we will examine innovative policy statements across aligned and connected issues. So there may be some things that this commission discover that the city has no charge over, but we may have a position statement, or we may have some examples of some policy that can be suggested to the mayor and council that can be shipped over, for example, to the Board of Education. The city of Brookhaven have no oversight of the Board of Education for DeKalb County, but there may be some innovative policies that this commission can share with the mayor and council, which will ultimately be shared with the board of the school board. Okay. This commission at the onset will be working over the next year or so. Because of the amount of work that is going to be required, We have created subcommittees that will be working on topical areas simultaneously. Thus far, there will be a subcommittee for vision and mission, procurement and contracting, hiring and retention, and again, the police department continuum of force policy oversight and accountability. As we work within the subcommittee structure, and this is where the work is going to happen within the subcommittee, all output will come back before the full commission. As a young city, this is a great exercise to review, analyze, and improve how we as a city handle matters that align with social justice, race, and equity to remain a great and a sustainable city. At this time, I would like to introduce our co-chairs for each subcommittee, and I asked them not to wear their casts. I had to do some arm twisting, no. But I asked them, they graciously accepted the honor of serving. So at this time, I will introduce our co-chairs for each subcommittee. For the Mission and Vision Subcommittee, our co-chairs are Commissioner Tiffany Russell. You can give them a social media applause. And Commissioner Axa Pascal. Okay, thank you. For our Hiring and Retention Subcommittee co-chairs, Commissioner Tawana Minor and Commissioner William Naglish. For Procurement and Contracting Subcommittee co-chairs, we have Commissioner James Moses and Commissioner Alex Thomas. And then finally, for Policing and Continuum of Force Subcommittee co-chairs, we have Commissioner Sharaf Arif and Commissioner Monique Hudson. Committee members will be assigned soon. If you previously did not indicate which committee you would like to join, have no fear. In the coming days, you will receive a survey and you will have another opportunity to select a committee that you would like to join. And we will be making those assignments in the coming days, in the coming weeks. Also, during the second week of March, there will be an orientation for our co-chairs. Please, co-chairs, please be on the lookout for an email inviting you to the co-chair orientation. At this time, we will have our moment of inspiration, and I will ask Commissioner Tom Woodward, to come forward and present us with the moment of inspiration.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the opportunity, and I certainly appreciate that we are all gathered here again tonight to continue our important work. At our last meeting, we spent a little time introducing ourselves and getting to know each other in our breakout sessions. If I may, I'd like to share some of my personal journey with all of you, a journey which ultimately brought me to this commission's work. My journey began as a small child growing up in the 1950s in a segregated small town in North Florida. When I saw separate entrances and separate waiting rooms for black and white patients at our family doctor's office, it seemed odd to me. I pointed out to my mother that when my name was called, we walked down a shared corridor to the same exam rooms and were treated by the same nurses and doctor. The separateness up front made no sense to me. Working on my uncle's family farm harvesting tobacco in the summers, starting when I was 10, I first got to know and interact with black children around my age and older on a daily basis. Many of their families lived on the farm in unpainted wooden shacks without indoor plumbing. I learned the only real difference between us was our economic circumstances, and I sensed just how limited their future prospects were to grow out of this structured poverty. Later during high school, our county's segregated public school system merged dual high schools into a single high school in my hometown. There were now black and white children in every class, but there was an obvious concentration of whites in the advanced level classes, and a concentration of Black students in the intermediate and basic level classes. 12th graders in some of the basic level English classes were using 6th grade books. Now I was seeing just how our dual school system had deprived generations of Black children the opportunity to learn and advance their future employment prospects. When our high schools were combined, so many white parents moved their children out of our public school system into newly formed private schools that my graduating senior class was 86% Black. I graduated from high school 50 years ago and started college in Atlanta. I've now lived in 5 different cities in 5 different states. All but one of these cities were majority Black, including my hometown. Our country has certainly made strides extending civil rights, educational, and economic opportunities more broadly through affirmative action and other means, but I've also seen, and many more of us are now aware, just how far we still have to go to achieve equity. I believe it is no accident that we are all here together. Our individual life journeys have brought us to this same place and time. However, we may have been inspired and then been motivated to get involved in our commission's work. It must have started with a change in our individual consciousness at some point. We became conscious of the need to change the status quo for the betterment of others and ourselves, and so we stepped forward. I'm looking forward to learning more about your life journeys and to working with you to help create better opportunities for everyone who has anything to do with Brookhaven. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Woodward. We appreciate your moment of expression and your moment of inspiration. Thank you very much. At this time, we will call on our consultant and they will now come forward and take it from there.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Woodward. That was beautiful and that was touching, and it is so appropriate for where we want to move next. And that is in a moment of reflection. I'm Leslie Grady and I'm with Chrysalis Lab, but we really hope to be friends and guides to each of the commission members as we go through this journey together. So we'd like to start now by asking you to take just a few minutes to think about your personal journey as has just been shared with us, but your personal journey and experience with race and racism. So if you could grab a piece of paper while I'm talking. So the survey results that, that came back to us that you completed, and thank you for that, indicated that many individuals on the commission have had experiences with race and racial inequality. 30% of you have personally experienced incidents of racism in Brookhaven, and nearly 60% say that you have witnessed incidents of racism. And we know that our personal journey is intertwined with our collective journey, and that we're not going to change the world and change Brookhaven until we change ourselves or create a world for our children that we can't imagine ourselves. And so tonight we're going to begin that journey. So I'm going to ask you to take a pen and just reflect on the question, when was the first time that you became aware of race? When was the first time that you became aware of race? And what emotion was associated with that experience? I ask you to jot that down, and if you're comfortable, place it in the chat so we can begin to learn and experience one another. The first time you became aware and what emotions were associated with that experience. We'll take about 3 minutes for you to do that. Thank you, James. Confusion. Ah. Disappointment. Confusion. What is this? What are we looking at? What am I feeling? What am I seeing? Yes. Anger. Oh, I love it. Unattached. And I'm going to ask our team, it's hard, I'm trying to keep up with them, but if you see anything that you'd like to share. Oh, I can't understand why I was being called names. This is so real. Profoundly disturbed. And take just another minute. You guys are going, and these are powerful.
And Leslie, we also have pride and some embarrassment listed above.
Embarrassment. And that brings to mind again this personal and collective journey, right? I can imagine that that's embarrassment on a personal level, but for where we are and that would even exist. Concern.
A lot of it is guided by place, where people have been and where people go, where they begin to see race.
Mm-hmm.
Timely mention of roots given the passing of the inevitable Cicely Tyson. What roots meant to many people.
I'm also seeing that a lot of our experiences were in those very formative years, right? First grade, second grade, third grade, as we were coming up. So this is something we've lived with, you know, all of our lives, that there's some difference here. There is this thing called race. It's been a part of us. Thank you for sharing. It is so important that we share our words and our stories and our emotions. And before we depart from one another tonight, we're going to ask you to continue sharing, not only in this meeting, but we're going to offer some opportunities for you to connect not only with one another around these, but also for us to write a collective story, right, of this journey together. And our ability to hear one another's stories and words and to share them will make us stronger for the work ahead of us. So I'm going to move on. Please continue to share what's on your heart. And I'm going to turn it over now to Mendy to give us a little bit more of our Brookhaven history.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining and thanks for having us again. So last month, we talked a little bit about the Indigenous history of the land that makes up Brookhaven. And today we wanted to continue discussing its history. But before I jump in, let me provide a little bit of context as to why we feel it's important to continue discussing Brookhaven's history. Inclusion is such a fundamental part of advancing social justice and equity. The city of Brookhaven is diverse and encompasses many unique communities. By highlighting them, we hope to build awareness of and appreciation for all residents, such that your work on this commission will truly serve everyone who calls themselves a resident of Brookhaven. So this week, I'm excited to talk about Linwood Park, the historic African-American community that recently obtained official historic designation from the city of Brookhaven. Like most communities in Brookhaven, Linwood Park's history dates back further than the city itself. Established in the 1920s during the height of the Jim Crow era and legalized segregation, Linwood Park was the first African-American suburb to be developed in DeKalb County. During the early 1900s, African-American communities faced intense discrimination in the South, driving the Great Migration of 6 million African-Americans from southern states to the North. For those who remained, they would have to endure constant oppression and extreme discrimination. A common facet of Jim Crow laws and discrimination was a lack of basic public services such as education, as was the case in Linwood Park. So in 1942, a one-room schoolhouse was built on donated property on May Avenue with labor, supplies, and money provided by the community. Several years later, the community would purchase a 4-acre lot on Osborne Road and deed the land to DeKalb schools. A larger building would be constructed here and become Linwood Park School and would serve African-American elementary and high school students from all over North DeKalb. Many students would walk to school, but others would ride the bus from Dorville and Chambly. The school would close in 1968, after which Linwood Park students would be integrated into Cross Keys High School and Chambly High School. However, the building remains today and it's used as a recreation center owned and operated by the city of Brookhaven. Today, Linwood Park looks and feels much different from the African-American enclave it was throughout most of the 1900s. Gentrification and redevelopment have since transformed the neighborhood, with dramatic shifts to its demographics and housing stock. Nevertheless, current and former residents celebrate the community each year at the Linwood Park Community Day celebration, and they continuously advocate for recognition and remembrance of the community's past. To ensure that the historical significance of the Linwood Park neighborhood is preserved and recognized well into the future, last October, the city of Brookhaven approved an official historic designation for Linwood Park. This will result in the placement of permanent historical markers, commemorative plaques, and other monuments that will inform all who come of its deep and valuable history.
Thank you so much, Mindy. So we're getting ready to get into the meat of our discussion, but I wanted to remind everyone that there is a glossary that is on the commission website that I really encourage you to look at and access. I get to see a lot of these, and it's one of the most comprehensive ones that I've seen, and it is constantly being updated. Because over the next few months, we're going to hear many terms used. And the first part of getting on the same page is starting with how we name things and how we think of things. And so on the this glossary can help us as we move through. Today, I'd point you to the following concepts that you're going to hear, and you might want to jot them down, but you're going to hear these terms: race, whiteness, implicit bias, racism, individual or personal racism, and cultural racism, and systemic racism or structural. So return to this glossary, remember it is there for you, and any questions that you might have around lack of clarity or any terms that aren't there, please let us know and we will get you some definitions. And so now we move into the heart of our meeting, which is how did we get here? Beginning with our homework, the origin of everything. We shared the history of the concept of race in America as an evolving physical, social, and political and economic tool for those with power. And our article emphasized the importance of coming together and recognizing our power as citizens to engage and to change and improve our democracy. And that is what is at the heart of the commission and its purpose. And we trust these have been helpful to you as you embark upon this important work, right? At a time of real pain and division, where we're all enduring the impacts of a raging pandemic that's impacting our livelihoods, our families, our children's education, our mental and social well-being. And perhaps for some of you on the commission, and certainly many of your neighbors in Brookhaven who are losing their jobs, losing their homes, and losing their hope. And then you've come to assess and recommend actions for making Brookhaven more equitable, knowing that it matters if those who need work the most have open and equitable opportunity to apply for and receive work to feed themselves, knowing that it matters if businesses and entrepreneurs who seek to do business in your city have equitable and open access to apply and receive opportunity, knowing that it matters that if police answers a call, in that split-second moment, they're treated with respect and dignity. That when anyone comes into the Brookhaven city limits, they can know they're in a welcoming and inclusive place because of the commitments that you are documenting in your mission and operating charter. So building on our homework, we're going to focus a little bit on how we got to this point. Isabel Wilkerson, a noted journalist and author who was the first woman of African-American heritage to win the Pulitzer Prize in journalism. In her newest book, Isabel refers to America as having a caste system, defined as a rigid and often arbitrary boundary system to keep the rank groupings apart, distinct from one another and in their assigned places, which endures because it's often justified as divine will. And so this evening, we're going to share a little bit of Isabella's extraordinary prose with you and ask you to think about her framing of our country's history of race. As you reflect on her words, consider the emotions you listed earlier. How do they relate to this framework? Do they make sense? And so I'll ask you, and most of you have, to mute your mics, and I am going to share with you a little bit of Caste before we go into our group setting.
Chapter 2, an old house and an infrared light. The inspector trained his infrared lens onto a misshapen bow in the ceiling, an invisible beam of light searching the layers of lath to test what the eye could not see. This house had been built generations ago, and I had noticed the slightest welt in a corner of plaster in a spare bedroom and had chalked it up to idiosyncrasy. Over time, the welt in the ceiling became a wave that widened and bulged despite the new roof. It had been building beyond perception for years. An old house is its own kind of devotional, a dowager aunt with a story to be coaxed out of her, a mystery, a series of interlocking puzzles awaiting solution. Why is this soffit tucked into the southeast corner of an eave? What is behind this discolored patch of brick? With an old house, the work is never done, and you don't expect it to be. America is an old house. We can never declare the work over. Wind, flood, drought, and human upheavals batter a structure that is already fighting whatever flaws were left unattended in the original foundation. When you live in an old house, you may not want to go into the basement after a storm to see what the rains have wrought. Choose not to look, however, at your own peril. The owner of an old house knows that whatever you are ignoring will never go away. Whatever is lurking will fester whether you choose to look or not. Ignorance is no protection from the consequences of inaction. Whatever you are wishing away will gnaw at you until you gather the courage to face what you would rather not see. We in the developed world are like homeowners who inherited a house on a piece of land that is beautiful on the outside, but whose soil is unstable loam and rock, heaving and contracting over generations, cracks patched, but the deeper ruptures waved away for decades, centuries even. Many people may rightly say, I had nothing to do with how this all started. I have nothing to do with the sins of the past. My ancestors never attacked indigenous people, never owned slaves. And yes, not one of us was here when this house was built. Our immediate ancestors may have had nothing to do with it, but here we are, the current occupants of a property with stress cracks and bowed walls and fissures built into the foundation. We are the heirs to whatever is right or wrong with it. We did not erect the uneven pillars or joists, but they are ours to deal with now. And any further deterioration is, in fact, on our hands. Unaddressed, the ruptures and diagonal cracks will not fix themselves. The toxins will not go away, but rather will spread, leach, and mutate, as they already have. When people live in an old house, they come to adjust to the idiosyncrasies and outright dangers skulking in an old structure. They put buckets under a wet ceiling, prop up groaning floors, learn to step over that rotting wood tread in the staircase. The awkward becomes acceptable, and the unacceptable becomes merely inconvenient. Live with it long enough, and the unthinkable becomes normal. Exposed over the generations, we learn to believe that the incomprehensible is the way that life is supposed to be. The inspector was facing the mystery of the misshapen ceiling, and so he first held a sensor to the surface to detect if it was damp. The reading inconclusive, he then pulled out the infrared camera to take a kind of X-ray of whatever was going on, the idea being that you cannot fix a problem until and unless you can see it. He could now see past the plaster, beyond what had been wallpapered or painted over, as we now are called upon to do in the house we all live in, to examine a structure built long ago. Like other old houses, America has an unseen skeleton, a caste system that is as central to its operation as are the studs and joists that we cannot see in the physical buildings we call home. Caste is the infrastructure of our divisions. It is the architecture of human hierarchy, the subconscious code of instructions for maintaining, in our case, a 400-year-old social order. Looking at caste is like holding the country's X-ray up to the light. A caste system is an artificial construction, a fixed and embedded ranking of human value that sets the presumed supremacy of one group against the presumed inferiority of other groups on the basis of ancestry and often immutable traits, traits that would be neutral in the abstract, but are ascribed life and death meaning in a hierarchy favoring the dominant caste, whose forebears designed it. A caste system uses rigid, often arbitrary boundaries to keep the ranked groupings apart, distinct from one another, and in their assigned places. Throughout human history, 3 caste systems have stood out. The tragically accelerated, chilling, and officially vanquished caste system of Nazi Germany, the lingering millennia-long caste system of India, and the shape-shifting, unspoken, race-based caste pyramid in the United States. Each version relied on stigmatizing those deemed inferior to justify the dehumanization necessary to keep the lowest-ranked people at the bottom and to rationalize the protocols of enforcement. A caste system endures because it is often justified as divine will, originating from sacred text or the presumed laws of nature, reinforced throughout the culture and passed down through the generations. As we go about our daily lives, caste is the wordless usher in a darkened theater, flashlight cast down in the aisles, guiding us to our assigned seats for a performance. The hierarchy of caste is not about feelings or morality. It is about power, which groups have it and which do not. It is about resources, which caste is seen as worthy of them, and which are not, who gets to acquire and control them and who does not. It is about respect, authority, and assumptions of competence, who is accorded these and who is not. As a means of assigning value to entire swaths of humankind, caste guides each of us often beyond the reaches of our awareness. It embeds into our bones an unconscious ranking of human characteristics and sets forth the rules, expectations, and stereotypes that have been used to justify brutalities against entire groups within our species. In the American caste system, the signal of rank is what we call race, the division of humans on the basis of their appearance. In America, race is the primary tool and the visible decoy, the front man for caste. Race does the heavy lifting for a caste system that demands a means of human division. If we've been trained to see humans in the language of race, then caste is the underlying grammar that we encode as children, as when learning our mother tongue.
So I'm not on camera because I have unstable internet, but I am enjoying this immensely. And we want to move into and prepare for our breakout groups. It's sort of reflecting on Ms. Wilkerson's powerful words. It reminds us that in order to discuss race and equity and the concepts, we must also discuss the concept of systemic racism and how race has been intentionally constructed to permeate every aspect of our society, particularly in the United States. It shows up in everything from disparities in wealth, the racial wealth gap, employment, who's employed and how they're employed and what they do and what jobs they are able to obtain, where we live and what rents we pay, what mortgages we can secure, who the government watches and who they don't watch, how people are charged with crimes or incarcerated, who's arrested for drugs and who's not, immigration laws and who's allowed to immigrate in this country without any issues or concern and who are caged, whose children die early, whose parents die all too young, what healthcare issues we struggle with, who has access to healthcare. All of these are part of the concept of systemic racism. And we will never understand or fully capture the nuances of what systemic racism is in this country without understanding its association with oppression, particularly of Black people in this country. So now we're going to move into some small breakout groups to discuss systemic racism and its existence in our community of Brookhaven. So we're going to move into breakouts, 5 breakout groups. So we'll each have some opportunity to talk with one another. And we're going to discuss 2 questions. So before I share them, when you go to breakout groups, that you'll have to identify a reporter, because when we come out of the breakout groups, we want to spend some time with your reporter sharing your conversation. So the 2 questions we'll put this in the chat when we get in breakout groups. The 2 questions reflecting on Isabel Wilkerson's work we want you to think about is, do you think a racial caste system exists? Do you think a racial caste system exists in Brookhaven? Why or why not? And the second question is, how do we ensure that the commission's recommendations acknowledge and addresses the issues of race and caste in Brookhaven? Again, when we think about our charge as a commission, how do we ensure, as we do our work, particularly through our subcommittees and otherwise, that our recommendations acknowledge and address the underlying issues of race and caste? So In a couple of minutes, or I guess now Jaleesa will put us in breakouts. Again, first thing we'll do is identify a reporter. We'll get a 5-minute warning. So let's make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak. Okay.
All right, I'm going to send you all to your breakout rooms now.
Yay.
Yay,
It works.
it works, right?
You're doing awesome.
Better than last time.
Yeah, but that wasn't your fault.
All right.
So everybody's going to be joining us again in just a couple of minutes, or at 8:15. So a little bit over a couple.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep.
Do you need me to do anything?
No, you're good. Thank you, though.
Okay.
All right, everybody should be joining us in about 30 seconds. And next on the agenda is public comment. Welcome back, everybody. I think people are making their way back, but the rooms will like forcefully bring everybody back here in about 5 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, when are you gonna finish?
Another 30 minutes.
Time goes so fast.
We need 10 more minutes.
What she said.
Where did Kathy go? Kathy, where'd you go?
Here I am. Yeah.
Oh, we voted when you were away. You
Doing that quick beam me up.
I don't even know I'm ill prepared for this.
All right, Commissioner Wells.
So I don't know. Looks like we're waiting for a few more folks to come back in. And we will, after we do our report outs, we have some time in to just open it up to the full commission around just insight and feedback. So.
Everybody's back?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. Well, as Leslie indicated, and as we discussed it at the top, we're going to ask each recorder to share the highlights of their discussion for 2 minutes. And then fortunately, we should have some time to hear any other points that are good for the whole tonight. So I was in group 1, so I at least know who the recorder was there. And so we'll start with group 1, and that was Karen, Commissioner.
Okay, so bear with me, everybody. So the first question, do we think Brookhaven has a racial caste system? I think we were all in unanimous agreement. It exists everywhere. Linwood Park was a great example about that. The ARC data we looked at last week talked about the wealth gap between white and Black Americans, and the Atlanta Regional Commission, on average, if an average white person has 100 wealth units, then an average Black family would have 10. It shows up in housing and transportation, in schools, voting experiences, very different study. We talked about what's going on in Texas and concerns about what that would look like if it happened here in Brookhaven, and especially our more vulnerable communities and how they'd be negatively affected, and how these issues, even though they're outside of our control, they're like a domino effect. And especially people in vulnerable areas, they're not necessarily aware of all these issues. And they're just focused on the basics. So that's a huge need, that just the need for awareness. And then we had the sense that we really wanted to set a goal of having the same quality of life for everybody. And so when we hit to the second part, we talked about the importance of reviewing documents that are used by various commissions or boards or planning agencies of the city, to make sure that there's no implicit bias in those documents that would shape decisions, to check how we are defining, how we may be perhaps defining economic development differently for our more vulnerable communities, and to look at that through a lens of racial equality for all. We wanted to have a special sensitivity for the vulnerable neighborhoods. I'm probably running out of time. We talked about the importance of getting input from all citizens about what their expectations were, and spent a lot of time on getting the message, especially to impoverished communities, to not rely on them to get their input to us. They may not have access to Wi-Fi. They may be struggling through with jobs. And so we needed to identify people in a community to represent them, maybe business leaders or clergy that are well-known and respected. And then those messengers needed to be empowered to have a voice with the city so that their input really mattered. What did I miss?
Perfect. Aaron, that was perfect. Thank you. You got it all. Group 2. Who was a recorder for group 2? And I don't know.
Might have been us. And Connie was our reporter.
Are we
Okay.
correct here? Great. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Connie.
Sure. Yeah. For the first question, our group agreed that there was a resounding yes, that there is an incredible caste system, as Karen said, just across the world, US as well, but specific to Brookhaven. Yes, we probably spent a little more time, as much as we could have, on any of the components of a caste system. We spent a little more time on housing and education in particular. We talked a little bit about the way that you go from south to north Brookhaven and the differences there. But in spite of income and wealth or what have you, we also just talked about, equality or lack thereof, and access. We spent a little bit of time talking about policing and even the court system, and how, again, probably regardless of color or, race, that there are inequities there. Tom shared, that I believe you said 75% of traffic violations in the city of Brookhaven are dished out to Hispanics. That's you think about it, if you just took that analogy to the world, and I don't want us to get, stuck politically, but we know Barack Obama could not have gotten away with the same things that Trump's gotten away with. That's a part of the caste system. We talked about the fact that often diversity is invited and inclusion is intended to be welcome, but once you employ or invite or hire the diverse candidates, there is an expectation of assimilation that defeats the purpose of diversity and certainly impacts belonging. We talked about the fact that if you're an immigrant and you're coming in to a degree, and Ruben shared this, which has broadened my lens, that you do want to assimilate to a certain degree in terms of being an American. So at what point do you draw the line and still, you're able to bring your whole self with some assimilation. We talked about the dominant culture setting the norm. So even as we're on this commission and we think about what's right or what's wrong or what's acceptable or what's our measurement, it's based on what? It's really based on a dominant culture, and what makes that really okay. So we talked some about sort of, shifting to the next question and how we're going to ensure that we acknowledge. We talked about the possibility of maybe this commission coming up with our own norms as opposed to the dominant culture being what our norm should be. Is that something to look at? And even as we interact and engage, do we want to have some commission norms of how we engage in conflict so that we can come up with the best ideas? And maybe we debate them pretty strong and pretty heavily as long as they don't get personal. And that's what we spent a little bit of time talking about. How do we ensure that so that we don't have a quiet voice that has a great idea that never gets put, to the commission? We talked about vetting recommendations that we come up with the broader community, because we're just a representation of the broader community. So we don't want to operate in a vacuum. So how do we incorporate opportunities to invite other voices in, potentially, and I'm not positive of this. When I think about education, it makes me think of this next thing is you can get involved, but you've got to have a computer and you've got to have a cell phone and you've got to be able to log in. And maybe some of the population that's going to be impacted by some of the recommendations we make they just don't have all of that. When you think about homeschooling, we're dealing with that, there in terms of internet connection. So how does the commission address inclusivity, I guess? What else? We just talked about broadening our lens and making sure that we start to consider and be open to other voices and other perspectives. Did I leave anything out from group one? No? Okay.
great. Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate group 2. Group 3. Who is a recorder for group 3?
Commissioner Wells?
Oh, thank you very much. I wasn't sure what group we were in. I was kind of thrown in this group. It was a really great conversation. The majority of our group was unsure whether or not we actually in Brookhaven had a racial caste system. We were kind of like ambivalent about that. But most of us spoke to the fact of the inequities that are, that are obvious compared to the Peachtree Road side of Brookhaven and the Buford Highway corridor. This is where we see the biggest part of inequities. As you were saying, that we see that the majority of the people who are arrested are Hispanics. I am personally from the Linwood Park community. I have been in Brookhaven all my life, lived there before they became a city. And but it's definitely a system of racism and economic inequity. Okay, but what's happening in Brookhaven, when we look at the golf course side of Brookhaven, we know that there is something that we can equate to a caste system. On the Buford Highway side, there are several people, there are groups on that side. They are working to sustain the housing for the people on the Buford Highway side. This commission should work to sustain those businesses on Buford Highway. We discussed whether or not we wanted to make sure that the people on the Peachtree side would go over to the Buford Highway side and have an experience of diversity, because that's what we should do instead of, which was a good point by Chris, was instead of us saying, okay, well, let the people from Brookhaven come over to the Peachtree Road side. We understand that there are not as many restaurants on the Peachtree Road side as there have been there on the Buford Highway side. There's a plethora of restaurants on the Buford Highway side. We talked about the Buford Highway Farmers Market and how diverse it is and how much great diversity we have in Brookhaven if we capture it. Now, I don't think the farmers market is in Brookhaven, but we have a plethora of diversity in Brookhaven. Is it fair? No, it's not fair. We can go back to the school system that we talked about last week. One of the things that I noticed, and I didn't get a chance to bring it up to my group, was the fact that when we look at the population of Ashford Park Elementary School, Hispanic population, and the population of Montclair Elementary School, Hispanic population, what happened is that they took a large number of those Hispanic children and put them in the Montclair school. Okay, it overly burdens that population of children because they come in not speaking English. So, but at Ashford Park, because it has been gentrified with people who are economically sound, it's a totally different story. So it is a caste system when we're talking about economics. Also, we talked about a taste of Brookhaven, a diverse taste, a bicycle tour. With this group of people, maybe we could start with this group, or we get a chance to go and the Buford Highway and taste some of the wonderful diversity that's there, and also do a tour so that you can see what Linwood Park is about. Go over to the Brookhaven corridor and see what the wonderful restaurants they have. Please go to the Sweet Hut. It's great. And the other thing we talked about, public input. This was a very good point. One of the people on our group said, in order for us to experience change, for people to experience change, they must be felt. They must be made to feel uncomfortable. Learning is sometimes uncomfortable. So if we bring these ideas to the public and get their input, people on Peachtree saying, hey, are these people as valuable? Or is there capital value? There's capital value, on the side. But when it comes to the Buford Highway corridor, are they as special as the people on Peachtree? Great conversation. So those were the things we talked about, and what can we do? We need to have public input. We need to do some things where we are doing activities to promote diversity, because in Brookhaven, we have great diversity. In Linwood Park, we have the Linwood Park Day Festival every year, the first Saturday, to preserve our history. And those things are also going on in Brookhaven Highway. When this city became a city and we went to the state capitol, there were people at the golf course who wanted to keep their Atlanta address. They did not want to change it to Brookhaven. There's a lot of things that goes into what our job is. And I think with exactly with the people I was working with, we'll be able to go. Okay, team 3. Did I say everything that we said?
Great. Thank you. Thank you. It's great. I just as a side note, I'll tease you. My husband and his friend, their goal is to visit every restaurant on Beaufort Highway before. That's their goal. So they're working at it. They work at it.
Yeah, this is great. It's great.
Yes,
Mr. Torres will tell you, Mr. Torres.
Yeah.
I have a list to give you.
Well, they keep going back to the same places because they like.
I was gonna say that's what I do.
Well, we discussed the scavenger hunt. One of our team members discussed the scavenger hunt. I think it's a wonderful idea for this team of people, all of us, to experience it. We can't talk it. Knowledge is power. We need to have the knowledge before we can go and tell anybody else. So if we can get that, Mr. Torres and all those guys who are familiar with him, Jonathan, he's very familiar with everything. What about chicken?
Wonderful. Great. Thank you, Group 3.
Thank you. Thank you.
Who's the recorder for Group 4?
I was the recorder for Group 4. So regarding the first question, we settled on that the racial caste system in Brookhaven, yes, it does exist. And we pointed out that you see it where the different racial and ethnic groups are living in different kind of isolated areas in the city. So of course we see the Hispanic and Latino population along Beaufort Highway, and then sprinkled in other areas of the city, or again, there's a pocket of Asian American or Asian communities, as well as the Black American community in Brookhaven, and how it's just not, it's not cohesive and it's not diverse in each and every community. And so we see that, and then we also see it as it relates to economics and, you know, who has the haves and the have-nots, or who has more money and who can afford to live in certain areas, even in Brookhaven, understanding that we also did learn that the rents and the cost to even live along Beaufort Highway is not necessarily affordable, that those houses, those apartment complexes, they charge a lot. They're increasing their rent. I think Christian told us that they've increased their rents by 40% along that line over the last few years. And when we were talking about some of the great things that Brookhaven has done as a city as it related to affordable housing, and how that only applies to new developments, and we haven't had the new developments necessary to enforce those affordable housing requirements, because that is associated with apartment complex. And we think as residents, and I know I might have, when you hear affordable housing, I'm thinking, oh, the houses that you purchase, or, you know, somehow making these nice fancy townhouses be affordable. But the conversation, you know, became clear that, well, no, those are private sellers. They're not under that structure. And so there's no incentive for them to say, hey, we're not going to only sell $600,000 townhouses and somehow push out a community of folks who can no longer afford to live here. But the legislation and the policies were related to new apartments, and we haven't had any new apartments. But that was kind of on the first question, and in discussing, like I said, the economic side of it, that as it relates to that caste system that we certainly do see here in Brookhaven. And then we started talking about, you know, making ways to ensuring that this particular commission was, their thoughts and ideas were being acknowledged going forward. And one of the big takeaways is accountability, and making sure that the things that we're suggesting are being implemented, and then we're following through, because, you know, we're acknowledging that this is a lot of work. We're putting money into it. Obviously, we're hiring consultants, as nice as they are. I'm sure they're not all volunteering. And so we've already shown that we're committed as a city to doing this work, but actually being accountable to the suggestions that we're making and the things that the city is saying that they're going to consider implementing. And so also trying to create community. We learned a lot about, you know, oh, well, we have all of this diversity, especially in religion in Brookhaven, and the different types of religious houses that are located in Brookhaven, but everyone's in their own little area and we don't even know. And so while Kathy was talking about maybe getting to these different restaurants and learning that you know, all the different diversity there, but even the houses of worship, understanding that we have synagogues and we have Muslim houses of worship, we have Jewish houses of worship, we have Buddhist houses, like all of those are here. And while your personal beliefs may not allow you to worship with them, but we can certainly build community. We can certainly enjoy each other. We can certainly bring our kids together. And because we talked a lot about how this systemic racism is really addressed through proximity and making sure that you're comfortable being around people who don't look like you, who don't have what you have, so that when you are walking down the street, you're not necessarily, your neighbor's not calling the police on you simply because you're a Black man who's exercising and you don't look like you would live here or you could afford to live here, because you've not just met that particular Black man, but you've met enough Black men to know to not be afraid of everyone that's there. And so when I'm saying I've been a resident for not nearly as long as Kathy, but I've been a resident here for a couple of years, but learning that these different, like I said, houses of worship are here, and I had no idea. And some are down the street and tucked behind a shopping center. And I would like to know that. I would like to bring my kids to their activities so that we can build tolerance. So that's learning, the commission learning what we have here in our community, and then being ambassadors and always asking, we really like the point is asking who's at the table and who else needs to be at the table, and making sure we're calling folks, you know, to the table. So that was really important to us. I think that was my time.
Okay, good. All right, well, we have time. Thank you, group 4. And we have 3 minutes for group 5, and then we'll maybe have a couple of seconds for.
That's our group. Commissioner Alexander has our notes, I believe.
And, you know, we'll probably be a little faster just because so much has been said. And in relation to the first question, there's a lot of agreement, and we heard a lot of the same things so this is the benefit of going last. There's a lot of dittos here. A lot of discussion about the ARC presentation of the data, confirming that there is a caste system in Brookhaven, where the data showed that based on race and age, your experience in Brookhaven is very different. So there was a lot of conversation about that, including a commissioner that shared their own experience as a parent, having to remove their child from Ashford Park because of of what they experienced there. We talked about the fact that there's no middle school within Brookhaven, and the pressure that puts on families to then have to make decisions about, you know, what they're going to do, where they're going to go, and how that might be experienced again by different racial and identity groups. We talked about wealth within Brookhaven and the wealth gap, property tax rising, the fact that you could experience living in a modest bungalow and then have a multi-million-dollar house come next door to you and jack up your property taxes. And we talked about the Atlanta Golf Club and its history, perhaps little known, I certainly didn't know, history as a former plantation. And the fact that residents of Linwood Park, you know, worked at the golf course, and that exemplifies that caste system. And they worked there because they could walk there. A lot of people don't know that. I also had a lot of questions about the ARC data that, you know, to drill further down into, looking at the idea that, you know, the area swells during the day because people are driving into work. And then where those traffic patterns were really interesting to me. There was a lot of residents, it looked like, that were going downtown to work. And so what are those jobs that they're going to? Are those, you know, blue collar jobs or those white collar jobs? What are the jobs that people are coming into Brookhaven to do? And then where are they going? So just diving deeper into some of that data would be interesting in answering that question. And then in terms of what to do to ensure that the recommendations of the commission go forward. We said, keep having the conversations, even when they're hard, and especially when they're hard. Education, continuing to educate ourselves and each other and our citizens. And I love the suggestions that were just being had about the scavenger hunts around houses of worship and restaurants and those sorts of things. And connect to the data, whatever recommendations we put forward, connect it to the data. Because my comment was a city rarely does anything that it doesn't feel like is in its best interest. And so you're going to have to put some statistics and numbers behind it and say, here's how doing this thing will improve the quality of life for everybody, not just one particular group. Speaking to that article that we received, that when you cut the curbs, make sidewalks more accessible, everybody benefits. So connect our work to the data, and then also provide a template for the city social justice lens and equity lens for which they can do all of their policy making, hiring, planning, etc., and make sure that they have that lens that they're doing that work through. I think that's it.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Commissioner Funny, do we have time for comments from the group as a whole?
Yes, what we do have time. What I will do for meeting protocol, I will open the public meeting for any public comment. And if there are no public comments, I will close the public comment section, and I'll turn it back over to you, Kim, if that's okay. And that will give you more time to handle the group discussion. So at this time, I will open the public comment section of the meeting. And the public comment portion of the meeting will last 30 minutes maximum. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes, thereby providing an opportunity for 10 speakers. If a speaker wishes to speak beyond 30-minute time frame, he or she will be transferred to the next meeting. If we have speakers beyond the 30-minute time frame, they will be listed next week. As a courtesy to others, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes or less. At this time, I will open the public comment section. Jalissa, do we have anyone who would like to speak?
I do not see anybody who would like to speak on our Zoom meeting. We do have a public comment on our Facebook page.
Okay.
It is written. It is from Gabriela Velasco Davalos. And she said, I would like to know what happens with the way to get to Montclair Elementary School. So probably regarding whatever, all the comments that our commissioners had about, education.
Okay.
So she said, I would like to know what happens with the way to get to Montclair Elementary School.
Okay, so we can respond to her in the chat. Going forward, if we can ask our public speakers to give their name and their address, that would be very helpful. So is there any other public comment?
No, we do not have any on our email, and that was the only one on our Facebook.
Thank you very much, Jalissa, and we will review that with the appropriate city's personnel to make sure we get a response to her. So back at this point, I will close the public comment section of the meeting. So Kim, it's back on you.
Great. Well, I think we have a few minutes, and it's been a very, very rich discussion. Anything that others want to share? We have about 4 or 5 minutes that hasn't been shared that is for the good of the whole.
This is
I'll
Jim.
jump in. This is Danita, everybody. I just had a thought listening to so much wonderful feedback, and thank you all for just the deep thinking and the concern for our city. But I would love to add somewhere in the notes the opportunities for partnerships, thinking of the businesses that are part of our community and how we can also hold those entities accountable to live up to the standards that we've been discussing tonight.
Point.
and this is Jim. I just want to remind people that some of us sitting in the conversation tonight, remember when there was no such thing as Wi-Fi, email, Twitter, and that when we discuss ways of broadcasting our message, we should also look at any low-tech opportunities that we have to reach out to those who may not have access to the high-tech communications. So that's something just to consider, because I know we have radio stations, AM, FM radio stations in the area that are still active in the community. We could utilize those to broadcast some messages, to reach out to others, to educate, to let them know what's going on in Brookhaven. That's all I've got.
Thank you, James. And I know a number of groups talked about that in terms of how we employ equitable mechanisms for communication and building community in Brookhaven. Other comments?
It's a very good point and observation. We appreciate that.
I would just put with Danita when you said partnerships, I thought not just maybe businesses, but how can we as a commission also engage the agencies that are doing the social service work in Brookhaven? So more than just the businesses, the people that are thriving and making Brookhaven economically sound, but people that are also, the different organizations that are helping those that need the assistance as well. How do we engage them and bring them alongside the process, as they probably have a very different view of some of the topics we're talking about?
And curious as to the extent that we as a community support those organizations that support our neighbors too. Are we being judicious there?
Yeah, I think that's another great point, Commissioner Henson. And one of the things this commission will be doing is that we will be establishing a speakers bureau where we're going to be partnering with different organizations. I'll have an opportunity to go in and I'll probably drag along some co-chairs, and we'll go and we'll talk about the purpose of this commission. We'll talk about what we're looking at, some things that we're considering. And then this is our way to get their input. So very good point, Commissioner Henson, with creating that partnership. And I'll add, Commissioner Moses, the city manager and I had a conversation, was it this week? Yeah, earlier this week, about a newsletter. I mean, hey, we still mail stuff. People still get information in the mail. And I think that will be one method of reaching those that may not have, access to the internet. And Jalissa is so wonderful. She's going to help us and translate it in Spanish. So we'll be able to reach those that do not speak English, or English is not their native language. So we want to be, very open to make certain that the community is engaged with our discussion. One other area that was mentioned, I heard earlier, and at the appropriate time, we will do this. We will have community dialogue sessions, and Leslie probably can share with everyone when that, we haven't planned it yet, but it will happen along the way, where the community is going to be invited in different settings, and just have a dialogue on some of the topical areas that we're discussing.
One of the interesting things that I noticed over the media this weekend was that I attended Oglethorpe University, and it was lily white when I went to school there 100 years ago. But this week I was so proud because they have hired a vice president of diversity. And that is amazing. At Oglethorpe, I mean, I was the president of the Black Student Caucus there, but we only had 17 kids on campus then. It is a private university, so it was expensive. I was just lucky enough to get a scholarship, but those are the people that we need to tap into and talk to about what's going on in these universities. And I know it's a person here on this panel, on this commission, that is the university. She's the diversity person. I don't know her name, for St. Martin Fields. I remember that being one of our commissioners' job the last time we were talking. But those are the kind of people that we need to be tapping into and tapping into the community, because this is the way to reach the young population of people. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah, very good point. Oglethorpe is a major institution here in the city. Unfortunately, Commissioner Alvarez took a new job out of state. But the good news is the dean at the university was accepted today to be on the commission to replace Commissioner Alvarez. So that's the good news. And he was provided the link to join us as a guest tonight. I don't know if Dean Williams is on. He will be presented to the mayor and council for voting and approve on this upcoming Tuesday. But very good point, Commissioner Wells. The institutional knowledge base there and what we can do as partners would be very beneficial because they are, like I said, they're one of our larger institutions here in the city.
Oh, thank you, everybody. This has been an extraordinarily rich discussion, and we have captured as much as we can, and it will guide us toward our future session. So I'll turn it over to Leslie.
Thank you, Kim. So I'm going to just say that we have spent the last month trying to figure out how to keep this conversation going. Beyond and between our third Thursdays. And even though we know that the subcommittees will be gearing up and going into action, they're work committees. And so much of this work is about those, as we've been talking, those personal bonds and emotions and connections. And so we've come up with some ideas and want to share them with you. So I'm gonna turn it over to Stephen to take you through those.
Hello, everybody. I'm Stephen Cosby with Chrysalis Lab, and very excited just to hear the conversation tonight and all of the great comments. I'm sure that everybody's group was as lively as ours was, with a lot of great ideas and connections being made between the data that they saw at the last meeting and then the stories, hearing from people's personal experience at this meeting, and really looking forward to keeping this conversation going. And so on that theme, we wanted to provide some opportunities for you to connect with each other even outside of these meetings. We know that it's difficult in an era of Zoom engagement, you know, to really feel like you're connecting with one another when you're on these Zoom meetings once a month. And while they are interactive and engaging, we wanted to come up with a couple of other options for you. And so these are both optional. You don't have to participate in them, but they are open and available to you. So I'm just going to talk through them real quickly. The first one is a book club. Kim and I will be working to manage this book club that will meet every 6 weeks. And the first book we're selecting is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. A terrific book. If you have not read it, cannot recommend it highly enough. Very deep and personal and impactful. So that's going to be our first book. And then successive books that we choose will be selected by the group that comes together. So we'll all discuss that together. And we'll provide some ground rules that really set the stage for a really productive, respectful dialogue. And so that's one way to engage with the group outside of the meetings. The second way, we're coming up with an idea for quads. So groups of 4 commission members to meet outside of the regular commission meeting. We want people to be safe and to be distanced and, you know, safeguard each other's health. So we want to encourage people to be safe and get together as, you know, as health allows. But this is also voluntary. And I loved people's ideas around going to some of the restaurants along Buford Highway. What an amazing cultural and, you know, just great treasure we have in your part of our region in terms of the food and the restaurants there. So that's one idea of how these quads might go out and explore parts of the community. You know, maybe part of it is going to Linwood Park and learning a little bit about that history that Mindy shared with us earlier this evening. And so we will send you prompts each month to get together with that group and kind of a different activity to come together and to explore, whether it's the parks and trails or the food and other outdoor spaces. So we want people to be safe, but get together as safety and the format of your group really allows. Again, this is voluntary. And if you're interested in either one of these options, we really encourage you to indicate that on your post-meeting survey. That's how we will be tracking who's interested in both the book club and the quads. So please mark that up on your survey and join one of these groups or both. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And I am going to prepare to turn it over to Chairman Funny. One thing that I didn't even get to catch you up on, Stephen, is that the city of Brookhaven will purchase the books for us. And so that was a wonderful offer. It just makes life a lot easier.
That's great.
So if you want to do, I know, it's pretty cool. Thank you, Christian. And so, so if you want to sign off, we'll make it as easy and simple as possible. So as we begin to close, I guess I would just say the question is, are we ready for what's required for us to do in this? And so we wanted to share a final video about one other consideration or a way to approach this. But before we do that, we'd like to ask for your help. We are committed, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, to charting our journey together. And we believe that it can be motivating and empowering, not only to us, but to others. And so also in this month's really quick follow-up survey, we're going to include a section for you to share your thoughts, deliberately, anonymously or not. And we're calling it a commission journal so that we can continue the dialogue and hear from you about what you're experiencing and what your path is like. And so then I'll ask now Jalissa to play the closing video, and then the next voice you'll hear after that is Chairman Funny. Thank you so much for allowing us to join you again this evening.
Okay.
So I have a question for you. Are you non or are you anti? Several months ago, in response to Ferguson, Baltimore, the killings of Freddie Gray and Tamir Rice, my friend Caitlin put up a Facebook post breaking down the difference between non-racism and anti-racism. Most of us are non-racist because racism is looked upon as some moral lapse. We feel quite self-assured by simply not being racist. I'm not a bigot. I don't sing that N-word when my favorite rap jam comes on. I didn't vote for that guy. I'm not burning any crosses. I'm not a skinhead. I don't, I won't, I'm not, I've never, I can't. What you end up with is an entire moral stance, an entire code for living your life and dealing with all the injustice in the world by not doing a damn thing. That's the great thing about none. You can pull it off by simply rolling over in your bed and going to sleep. So why are you sitting at home and watching things unfold on TV instead of doing something about it? Because you're a non-racist, not an anti-racist. Now do this for me. Take the C out of racist and replace it with a P. I'm not a rapist. I'm not friends with any rapist. I didn't buy that rapist last album. All these things that you're not doing. Meanwhile, people are still getting raped and Black boys are being killed. It's not enough that you don't do these things. You're going to bed with a clear conscience is not going to stop college students from getting assaulted. You thinking climate change is terrible is not going to stop climate change. You being so assured that you're not anti-Black, anti-Muslim won't stop the next hate crime. And it's wonderful that you recognize how brave gay people are when facing persecution, but they aren't the ones who need to be brave. We need to get active. We need to hold people accountable. We need to accept that what hurts one of us hurts all of us. And we need to stop thinking that injustice going on in the world isn't to an extent our fault. We need to stop being none and start being anti.
Racism is a business. For centuries, it has underpinned global economic exploitation. And like
you can stop it now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Leslie, Kim, Jalissa, and the entire Chrysalis Lab team. Tonight has been great. We've had great discussion. Thank you, commissioners, for participating. Your input means so much and was so valuable throughout the night. So I want to thank each of you for joining tonight. And Be on the lookout for upcoming information via email. As usual, if there are any questions or thoughts that you'd like to share with me, you have my cell number, you have my email. Just call me up and we'll chat. Is there any other business for the commission before I call for a motion for the adjournment? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion for the adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a second? All right, we don't need a second because everybody's going to vote yes, right? Yes.
I second.
All right, so we've been called for adjourn and the meeting is adjourned. We thank you for your time and your participation and your valuable input tonight. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.